Are you able to hear me now all right, John?
I hear you loud and clear.
All right. I'm going to put my headphones in so we don't get any echoes.
That sounds good. That sounds lovely.
I can still not hear you. I think it's just because of my headphone jack. Now, try me now.
I hear you fine. Do you hear me?
It's like I'm going to make sure that my settings for my audio is going to my headphones.
Right.
There, try it now, Jack.
Much better sound. Much better sound.
Awesome. Yeah, and you're in my earbuds now. Perfect. All right.
When I speak,
like I said,
get a bit of an echo on your end.
If you put your earbuds in, it should take away an echo. If you have little earbuds that you use with your cell phone.
I don't have any handy right now. No thanks.
That's okay. I may be able to modify that a little bit once I cut everything up. So I don't know if you got a chance to read the note that I sent you. So I was just going to kind of read that like a script.
Sure, it'll be fine. I think it'll be fine.
All right, perfect. So I just wanted to see if this will actually play. It may not play for us. I'm going to close this other thing. It may not play for us, Jack, just because it's a little bit heavy on the resources. But what I'll do is it will play on the YouTube clip when I finish it. But I'll see if this will play. This is the intro that I plan on putting at the beginning. Let's see if it will allow me to do this without freezing up too badly. All right, here we go. See if it... there we go, it's loading it. So I'm going to change the aspect of the screen just to show you how professional you can make it. So when I add this video clip to the screen, it'll make you and I on the side.
Right. Like
this. And it may be choppy for us here today, but just keep in mind that, well, here, I'll actually close my cam. That might help.
Mr. Pop.
Yeah. It's probably not going to work. I'll send you the link in your email and then you'll be able to see it. And then I'm going to change my avatar. Change my avatar back again. Hopefully. There we go. There, that should work better now. You can hear me okay still?
Oh, you're coming in loud and clear.
Perfect. All right, so I'll just start with the main part. And like I said, I'll just send you the video intro part in your link. And this was supposed to be for yesterday, so I have to change the dates on the video to keep that in mind. So, all right, so here we go. I'd like to thank all of you who may be listening here today, as I hope to help introduce you all to a courageous man from southeastern New Brunswick, and who is also a representative from the People's Party of Canada for BEAUSEJOURS, Jack Miner. And I welcome you today, Mr. Miner, and I thank you for taking the time to speak with me and to help showcase the party, its platform, and why you have chosen, at such a volatile time in Canadian political history, to take part and to represent your fellows and your neighbors at this time. I wanted to begin by describing for everyone out there the kind of life and experience that you've had that have shaped your life and your ideas. This Mr. Miner that we're going to speak with today has traveled extensively during the course of his life. He has a variety of work history, skills, and experience that most average and working class Canadians from just about anywhere would say is pretty familiar and could relate to. Mr. Miner is a man of faith. He's worked as a pastor and as a confidant to many communities, vastly expanding his experience with our diverse lives and our times. And he has counseled many individuals in many different communities, facing a variety of issues, all very personal in some cases and in others very community-centered. And he understands and he knows Canadians because he's met them. He lived with them. He works alongside with them. He's cried with them and he's remembered with them. And so to start with, Jack, I would like to thank you and help me fill in some of the details and the general view of your life and times and to correct my errors, of course. And I would ask you firstly, how is it that you moved from your academic studies out into the trades? And how did you find that transition, that change in perspective?
All right. Well, I've struggled with mental health issues from my early childhood. I struggled with a lot of depression as a child, which led to me dropping out of school in grade 10. I had a lot of depression, serious depression. When I was 21, I became a Christian, and I really sensed the call to ministry, and so I went back to school as an adult student, and that was for the first year very difficult as I regained academic skills. But after that first year, I was an A+ student and doing very well, and really enjoyed the academic world. And with my faith and my new community, I had a lot of help with those emotional struggles. I went into the ministry at the age of 24. I had my own church in Fort Nelson for 4 years, went to the mission field in Sri Lanka, did a lot of things, worked with the First Nations in Bella Bella. And that was very difficult. It was a very, very difficult pastorate where I was alone, very, very alone. It was a very remote reserve. Within the first 4 months of my being there, we buried 22 people. And the grief in the village was just overwhelming. And also the First Nations at that time, 1985, 86, was the time of the First Nations cultural renaissance, when they were restoring their cultural traditions. And I was pastoring for a denomination that was not up to speed on that. They were still in the 18th century, very parochial, very kind of condescending toward the First Nations. And I was kind of caught in the bite between those two forces. And it became quite overwhelming. I became very angry, and I had a very, very serious manic episode, lost a lot of money, betrayed myself terribly, and went into a 2-year depression when I went back to the family farm, and then went into construction from there and worked in construction for many, many years. So that was how I left the ministry. I love the ministry. I love what I'm doing there, but I had this issue of being bipolar, and I would be fine with it, except when I went under significant and serious stress. And then the issues of anxiety and depression would begin to overwhelm me again.
Was that something at that time, Jack, that you found was acknowledged and treatable, or was it just something that you had to sort of cope with and find ways to make through? Like, obviously your pastoral career suffered as a result of these kinds of emotional exposures. And so at that time, was there any kind of help for that sort of thing, or did you just have to sort of grit and bear it type of thing?
I went for psychiatric assessment and counseling, but at that time, the policy of the psychiatrist was not to be too direct with the bipolar people, clients. And so they did not significantly confront me and diagnose me as bipolar. They suggested it. And I went for a psychiatric assessment years later in 2011. And I asked why I wasn't properly diagnosed in 1988. And the psychiatrist said that was just what they did in those years. They didn't realize that you really have to confront a person because they're in serious denial and they don't want to admit it, which I certainly didn't. I didn't want to admit that I struggled with bipolar.
Mhm.
I had studied bipolar in Bible college academically, and I knew that the prognosis of bipolar is very, very ugly. A lot of people eventually commit suicide. And so in 2011, when I was eventually diagnosed, it felt like this, like death, that I had been sentenced to death. So it was very, very discouraging, and I went into another serious depression. But through it all, I never stopped working. I never, even I was pastoring in Bella Coola at that time, and I still continued to work for several months through a deep depression. And my denomination and my church council were extremely supportive, and they said that nobody would have known. Right? I covered it up and very, very well, and they were.
Is that something? And is that something that you continue to find valuable, even though your missionary work had come to an end? That sense of community and that family environment helped you to cope through that period. Is that something that was needed by Jack Miner at that time in his life?
Those First Nations people in Bella Coola were incredibly gracious and supportive. The shirt I'm wearing was given to me by my adopted First Nations mother, and she really believed in me and prayed for me. She was a real saint. And I still love those people very, very much. They're still I would like to be buried in Bella Coola. They're just what a beautiful people. So I went back into construction, which is kind of my default. And I took treatment for a year through 2012, and it was terrible, just terrible. The drugs were soporific. They just made you want to sleep. They dumbed you down. That's all they did. They didn't. If I continued to take the drugs, I would have had to quit working, go on welfare, and live at soup kitchens. And so that wasn't an option for me. So I quit the drugs, and I began to seek other ways, other solutions. And I just became my own guinea pig, and I pulled books out of the university libraries, and eventually came to realize that it was an addiction that I suffered from, a mental addiction that related to my creativity. I'm able to use my creativity to create endorphins, which I'd learned to do to survive a kind of a trying childhood. And I had to stop doing that. That's all there's to it. When I realized what I was doing, I had to stop it, which I did. And so I achieved full recovery from bipolar in 2013. I've never had anxiety or depression of any kind since then. And even through this whole election, I have had no anxiety whatsoever.
Well, that's very good to hear, Jack, considering what you had to make it through already. And I thank you for sharing those experiences. I'm sure many Canadians can relate to such things.
Yeah. I have a lot of sympathy for people who go through depression. It's a very hard thing.
After this most recent crisis in Canadian history, I would say that a lot of people say that they suffer from similar things and can understand anxiety at the very least.
Yes, indeed.
And so did you see any kinds of familiar, speaking of such things, did you see any kinds of familiar patterns from communities to communities that you served during that time that you still see that are things that matter and that are important to Canadians now that you'd like to help represent? Or is there anything we have in common that you've seen no matter where you've been?
Well, I remember the first day that I was described as a community leader. I was a young pastor in Fort Nelson. And my first question was, what on earth is a community? And so I had to begin to really start grappling with that question. What is a community? What is a community leader, and what do they do? And that became very important to me. And I've gone on to realize that organizations such as the Rotary are incredibly important community leaders. They are the nugget of every community. And I joined Rotary, and I will still continue to be part of Rotary. I think they're a marvelous organization, and there's one in every community in Canada. I think that if we go through a crisis as a nation, and we're going towards a crisis because of the debt and other things, the Rotary is, I think, the one thing we have in common in every community across Canada. And if we can facilitate the Rotary clubs, support their leadership, and work very closely with them, we will get through this crisis much better than we otherwise would.
Well, I thank you for that, Jack. And that's the amazing thing I think about was the first thing that I learned about you and noticed about you was your enthusiasm and your energy. And so after all this life's work and exhausting work and in some cases traumatizing work, like most people would want to ask you, what would lead you at such a potentially crisis-filled future for us? Because I'm sure many agree with you. What would lead Jack Miner to choose politics at a time now?
We need changes in government. The work that we need to do needs to be done in government, and the government we have is dysfunctional and treasonous. We need to replace that government, and we need a government that is going to tell the people the truth and come up with creative, resourceful solutions. I think both the liberals and the conservatives think that if we throw enough money at stuff, we can solve it. And this solution will not be about money. It'll be about people. And we need, it's the ability to facilitate people that will make the difference. And that's one of the things I'm extremely good at. Within 3 weeks, we created the best campaign team in Canada, in my opinion. I have an incredible team, and I don't take all the credit for putting it together, but I think I take a lot of credit for keeping it together, for keeping us working enthusiastically and cooperatively. And it's not easy because we are on the fly. We're making flying decisions. We're making mistakes. All of us are making mistakes. And somehow through it all, we're not blaming each other. We're not arguing. We're not fighting. We're working through those mistakes. And that's what we have to do in government. We can't expect not to make mistakes. But we have to keep the team together and keep moving forward, always moving forward. And that's what I'm good at.
Well, I think that's a remarkable thing at this point already for just such a short period of time is that this is your first time through this. And so the amount of, like I said, the amount of energy and enthusiasm and the way everyone works together, it seems to be quite the remarkable thing. And so speaking on those things, now that you've had a chance, because you were speaking to me earlier when we were speaking privately about traveling around the region and meeting different citizens in different communities and experiencing their lives, understanding their concerns, hearing their ideas. And so for our particular region in southwestern New Brunswick, because I think I'm sure everyone here will agree that networking and communication between the citizenry is a problem. For our particular southeastern part of the province, are there any issues that you think are common for the citizens here that we might like to focus on, or that you think in regards to those types of rights and issues that we brought up that need to be addressed collectively together?
Well, ignoring the brontosaurus in the room, which is the COVID lockdowns and crisis, I mean, that's a topic all of its own, which affects us enormously.
Of course.
Let's just talk about a small thing. I was working in Shediac yesterday campaigning, and I went to a vape shop. And the employees there gave me the 15-minute lecture on the advantages of vaping versus smoking tobacco and the health advantages of that, and how our local government just brought in a law that prevents flavors in the vaping. And it would seem to me that what that is a response to the tobacco lobby, which is trying to shut down the popularity of vaping by decreasing the enjoyability of vaping with flavors. And it's like I didn't know anything about vaping, but I spent maybe up to half an hour learning about that from them. And I think that's an important part of what I do. I don't know everything. I need to get out there and talk to the people to learn what their issues are. And one of the big issues in New Brunswick is banking. New Brunswick people cannot get access to loans to save their life. I spoke to a business owner in Shediac, and he's a reasonably wealthy man. I'm sure he's worth probably $1 million, $2 million maybe, looking at the business that he owns outright. Sure. And he tried to buy a property, I think in Capel, and he couldn't get a loan. They wouldn't give him a mortgage, even though he had all the assets to cover it. And that's absolutely outrageous. I would like to see the banks liable to lawsuit for that. If they won't give a loan to someone who has a very reasonable right to have it, they should be fined. I'd like
Well,
to see
this seems,
$100,000
I mean,
fine.
I think we can agree that this would be a volatile period. And so perhaps financial institutions are thinking of a risk factor. And I mean, I can certainly understand something like that, but I mean, we should certainly ask them to show, if they're going to use this as a form of policy over a region, we should certainly have a show of cause of why they feel this way. Like, I understand that general interest rates are manipulated from places outside of our region, but if this is a common theme that you're noticing around the region, then it potentially indicates a problem, and perhaps people should be talking about it, Jack.
It's a very, very, very big problem. This story that I told you was from before COVID, had nothing to do with COVID. And this is a businessman with the assets and the income to easily justify this mortgage. And he had to fight for it with the company, with the bank that he'd been with for 40 years.
And like you say, he has capital assets that he could use as a form of collateral to secure such things. Yes, yes. Strange, isn't it?
The house that I bought here in Memramcook was wanted by other young people in New Brunswick. And they're paying like $1,500 a month renting. The mortgage they would have had to pay, even if they had mortgaged the entire property, would not have been more than $400 a month. They couldn't get a loan. And so our New Brunswick young people, Acadian and New Brunswick young people who have grown up here, cannot buy properties because the banks won't lend them money. And I would try to make that illegal. I think there should be support from the government so that if these young people have a reasonable ability to pay that loan, the bank should be obligated to give them those loans or face serious fines, real serious fines. Because what's going to happen, and what is happening, is that all these houses and lands are being bought up by foreigners in Canada, people from out of province or even out of nation, and our own young people are being forced into economic slavery and renting for the rest of their lives. And that's an outrageous situation.
Well, they're being priced. You mentioned a $1,500 rent. I mean, that's only been in the last couple of years I've even heard of such a thing in Moncton. And so effectively the population's being priced out of their own market is what's happening. And these extrajudicial entities, interests, and financial leverages from outside the province and outside the region, I mean, when it comes to a variety of different public services intertwined with private interests, this is a common feature. And when you look at a place like Moncton, and perhaps we'll talk a little bit more about this a little bit further on in the questions, but the type of humanitarian catastrophe that we're witnessing in the region, this outpricing for young people and for people that are just beginning their lives is a serious issue for the region. And I've not just heard that from you, Jack. So
yeah, it's very serious. And the ramifications 10, 20 years down the road, they'll all be paying $3,000 a month. Both husband and wife will have to work to pay for a mortgage for a crappy house they could have bought for $70,000, $80,000 today. Right?
Making the transition, I think some young parents and some midlife parents can understand that out there. We've come through a period of prosperity where, a two-party family income was necessary for a while, but this is pushing it beyond that, even that acceptable extreme.
That's right. And single parents, it's just a nightmare for them.
It's a virtual impossibility as far as some of the people that I've talked to. They don't know how they're going to make it at all.
It's pushing them onto the street. And we're going to start seeing thousands of people living on streets in tent communities. And even there, even with a situation like that, there's ways to ameliorate. I love that word, ameliorate. You might not be able to solve the problem, but you can make it better. And
there's an easing.
Much better.
Yeah, there's an easing that can be accomplished. I agree. Yes, absolutely.
Like you believe washroom and kitchen facilities and showering and all kinds of facilities, like small community centers where people who are living on the streets can still charge their phones, wash their clothes, have a place where they can be called to go to work, right? Because when you're living on the street, you can't get a job because no one can get a hold of you. It goes on and on, how difficult it is for them. So we can make it better. And if we attack the banking issue right now, we can stop a lot of homelessness.
Mhm. Well, see, and that leads me into my next series of questions. Has to do more or less with the region and with sort of the topics that we're touching on. And I'm wondering, I'm probably imagining that you probably don't know, but I mean, would it interest you to understand that on 81 Albert Street is where the Moncton Mental Health Center and most of the experts, both court appointed and family appointed around southeastern New Brunswick, have their offices based out of that building. And it's facing old CN land, which, as you know, across Canada has been slowly vacated and sold on to other interests and used for other purposes. And a large portion on that side of the road is virtually void, vacant, overgrown, returned to wild type land, and a small tent city of what are essentially mental health sufferers and patients of 81 Albert Street had set up a small, I guess, tent village or small community, maybe a dozen tents, let's say. They had their own security. They had garbage pickup. They were trying to organize themselves, as you were referring to just a little while ago.
Yeah.
Within sight of their therapist, essentially. And it's a curious thing that social development here in southeastern New Brunswick will take complaints of elder abuse and child abuse and abuse of physically or mentally disabled people, which of course most of these street people suffer from. And within sight of their windows, the RCMP and other private interests had the whole place vacated, removed, bulldozed, traumatizing. I mean, it's not really a question of whether or not those people can stay in the center of the city like that. It's just not possible. But the way in which it was handled is a invasive, traumatic, and ultimately brutal and human act. And it was done within sight of the very people that are tasked by law, it would seem, to help and counsel and prevent this sort of abuse from these people. And I'm just wondering, this leads me into my following series of questions, because do you believe in this province that public servants and officials that are responsible for the care of our most vulnerable citizens, do you think they should be held accountable not only for acts that might sometimes occasionally turn out to be criminal, but also for the conduct in refusing to act? I mean, should public servants be accountable?
Well, of course they should be accountable. Holding them accountable is difficult. As someone who accessed psychiatric services for over a year, my personal desire is for a class action lawsuit against them all. The pharmaceutical industry controls the psychiatric industry and gives psychiatrists kickbacks for prescribing useless drugs that they don't really know what they do, which cause nothing but problems and force people out of work and onto the streets. So these psychiatrists make close to $1 million a year. I don't know if you know that, but I was told by a psych nurse that the psychiatrists in BC are making like $900,000 a year to force people onto the street and live in soup kitchens. Don't get me started. I could not. I really want a class action lawsuit against the whole industry. And
I think I heard some talk. Oh yes, go ahead.
Let me finish. The big problem in Canada with all of our services is that in almost every situation, the fox is in charge of the hen house, right? Sure. And we've created a legal system where they run their own little roost, and they are not there to protect Canadians. They're not there to serve Canadians. They're not there to protect justice. They're to protect their own ass and keep the money flowing in and keep themselves from being held accountable. And that's where we got to start. We got to create new structures where there is genuine citizen oversight of doctors, lawyers, psychiatrists. Every kind of professional must not be governed by their own college of professionals. They must be governed by citizen oversight. And we got to stop this fox running the hen house thing that's going on in Canada.
And that's also what have you heard any good ideas through the party lines, or have citizens tried to contribute any ideas, or have they been talking or speaking with any of those types of things, such as strengthening citizen participation, not just, of course, in our electoral process, which obviously needs more enthusiasm and encouragement to participation, but also just general participation, like you're saying, like in governance, in oversight and management, like these types of things. One of the worst,
as far as I'm concerned, one of the worst organizations in Canada is the College of Physicians and Surgeons. It's there to prevent surgeons from being held accountable, physicians from being held accountable. they can do anything they want, and a citizen cannot sue them, cannot even complain. There's no one to complain to. It's there to protect the ass of all and keep the money flowing in. That's all it is. It's a self-service organization. It should be eliminated, or it should be heavily loaded with elected citizens on that body. I have no respect for the College of Physicians and Surgeons, especially now with the COVID pandemic and having them threatening physicians to having their license removed for providing treatment for people. That's what the College of Physicians is doing, and the College of Nursing is doing the same thing to nurses. This is criminal. There should be accountability, and when we are elected, we will hold them accountable.
Well, thank you for those thoughts, of course, Jack. And there's many people that are concerned about such things. And on to some other concerning issues that I had. I'm sure you've had a chance to talk with many parents around the region, and I had to bring it kind of a full circle around to the rights issue again, and the violations, and basically the COVID pandemic in many eyes has been used as a blanket of opportunity for a violation across the spectrum of citizens' rights. And so family rights, children's rights, and parental rights is something that I just wanted to touch on before we close for the day. And I have some questions that many parents might be concerned about, and they're rightfully concerned that their children might, as a result of some of the things we've just talked about, they might be distrustful of medicine, doctors. I mean, we've seen the defund the police movement for the last 2 years. These pillars of confidence and trust in our communities, at least historically so, are being eroded for some reason. And although we can have an outrage in our older generations because we can see the loss of such institutions, we know that they should be trusted, and we do have confidence in them. We're upset about the corruption of them. But our young people are seeing something different, and many parents see that their children are seeing this hypocrisy. They're seeing this adults that are seemingly not sure of even what they're doing. And as you were beginning this whole conversation and interview today, Jack, it all comes down to leadership. And so what can the People's Party of Canada, or what would Jack Miner do to be able to reassure parents that propagandizing and weaponizing fear against our children is going to be something that's curtailed and brought to an end? Because we do not have a propagandistic society here in Canada with our media, or at least we're not supposed to. And I know with $230 million to the mainstream media organizations and entities in Canada, that becomes effectively easy. But I would like to get your thoughts on such issues, because there's some children especially, and some parents out there that are very concerned and fearful, and rightfully so.
Right. Is the health minister, is his name Dominic Carty, is that correct?
Dominic Carty is the Minister for Childhood and Early Development. All right.
And he's the one who's been saying that if children are not in school for 15 days, they may be apprehended. But that's
so the allegations are something to that effect. That's what I've been hearing, and it's being posted around Facebook, along with his quote that the children belong to the province, apparently.
Well, I would like to challenge Dominic Carty to enter into a public, formal debate with Dr. Robert Malone before he pushes these draconian, destructive, and in my opinion, demonic policies upon the people of New Brunswick and upon their children. He has not in any way proved that he has a justification for it, and he will not prove it until he proves it in public debate with Dr. Robert Malone, who is fully accredited and worthy of all acceptation, to use a biblical phrase. He's worthy of our respect as one of the world's top mRNA specialists. And until that public debate takes place, there is no reason for any parent, any citizen of New Brunswick or Canada to have any respect for Dominic Carty whatsoever. If he will not meet the professionals in debate, he has no business speaking. And that's the real big problem in Canada. There is no public, transparent, formal debate between all parties. It is purely propaganda from one side. And do you remember the book, the movie Jungle Book with Disney?
Oh, yes.
Remember that old movie? Do you remember the snake hanging from the tree going, trust in me, trust in me. Well, that's what we're getting from the government, from Dominic Carty.
Of course.
And like that snake, there's absolutely every reason not to trust in Dominic Carty, especially if he will not face the real experts in formal debate. And I challenge him to do that. And I urge him not to let anything but fear stop him. We are fed up with propaganda in Canada. And that's why people are voting for and very supportive of the People's Party of Canada.
And I would also suggest, just because it's been brought up to me many times, and I've received a couple of messages, that whoever, whether it's he or an advisor or an assistant that's running his public media campaign, many parents who have been subjected to name calling and ridicule online by a supposed minister are quite upset. And
well, should be.
He almost seems mentally volatile at this point with his public utterances. And so I just would like everybody out there to be aware of who it is that we're talking about in case they're not aware. He says some incredible things on Facebook. And like I said, you should probably just go and check for yourselves. But he or his staff are quite remarkable individuals. I will just put it that way.
Right. Well, I encourage parents not to send their children to school, not to mask them, and not to get vaccinated. And they should homeschool their children. They should have a credible educational plan for their children and be able to prove that in court if necessary. But they should do everything they can to protect their children from what's being done to them.
Well, you had brought up an idea that was a quite interesting idea a little bit earlier when we were talking privately, Jack. And as many people will know, there's nurses and public service workers all over the province that are being denied their employment at this point through these draconian measures, just to come again full circle. We were talking a little bit earlier about an idea that you had where certain administrators who have been subjected to these measures are in fact quite well qualified individuals and are quite full of capacity and enthusiasm to be able to work in their chosen field, even though it's dictated now that they apparently can't participate in the public system. And the idea that you were forwarding earlier was that the idea might be that some of these excluded individuals might just take it upon themselves to create their own, private system as an alternative to the public system that is, of course, fully accredited by fully qualified individuals, and therefore parents would have the choice. And I thought that was a very interesting idea that you brought up earlier, and I wondered if you might like to talk about that a little bit, Jack.
Sure. Well, I'm a homeschooler. We homeschooled our children, and I believe in it strongly at all times, not just during crises. And there are homeschool movements in New Brunswick, as there is around the world. And parents who want to homeschool need to connect with those movements. They need to use accredited curriculum. They need to have a daily study plan for their children. And I think they should be inspected. I think we should try to create an inspection service whereby accredited teachers, like the ones that work with me, will go to their home once a month and go through what they've achieved and be able to demonstrate in court, if necessary, that those families are effectively educating their children. And I know from experience that ordinary families, can do a much better job of educating their children than the public system ever can.
Well, I'm almost 50 years old myself, and some of the people that I met in the public school system as a youngster were some individuals hadn't come to public school until around 8th, 9th, 10th grade. And I can tell you to the person, all of them were remarkable individuals, every single one of them. And they were visibly so from the moment that they came into our lives. And some of them that I'm still in contact with, I mean, you can tell the difference between a publicly educated individual and a privately educated individual, even back then. And it wasn't very common. And so maybe that's what made it stand out, perhaps. But
sure. I can spot them across the street.
Of course, yeah. And the reason why it's good to bring these things up is because there's a lot of parents that are thinking about these sorts of things right now, Jack. And I think it's very important.
Yeah, it's foreign to them, and they're thinking of it as something quite radical, which it really is not. And I should look it up myself. I haven't been in New Brunswick that long, but I would like to know who is running the local homeschooling associations, and we should be able to get those links out to everybody. Contact them because they're there already. We don't need to reinvent that wheel. I was approached by a woman at the rally in Moncton when Maxime Bernier was here, and she had about 6 children with her, and she had a very large family, and they were all homeschooled, and the oldest was, I think, 16 or 17. And I spoke with several of those children. They were articulate, they were intelligent, they had serious questions to ask me. They looked me in the eye, they shook my hand firmly. They were leaders of the future, every one of them, and that's a typical homeschooler. And like I say, I can spot them. You know, who's it? Prager? PragerU? You're aware of PragerU?
No, not myself. No.
Okay. Well, he has a radio program in New York. A very intelligent man, Jewish man, and when he gets a young person asking a question on his radio show, and he considered that to be a very intelligent question. The first thing he asks is, "Are you a homeschooler?" And invariably they are. And I'll tell you what, the next thing Prager said, he says if he gets an adult asking a particularly stupid question, he says to him, first question is, "And where did you get your degree?" So that says a lot about our education system. Homeschooling is not inferior by any means. Let me just say something more about it.
Sure.
A child learns by asking questions, right?
Of course.
A child in the public school gets maybe 5 or 10 questions answered a day. A homeschooler can often get over 200 questions answered a day. And so in the public school is about teaching. The homeschool is about learning, right? We don't care about teaching. The children learn.
That's a common theme that I'm hearing, is that there's a lot of division and politics entering into our classrooms. I mean, I was in the public school system, in the old public school system, I can tell you without a doubt, every single one of my teachers throughout my history, and there's dozens of them, multiple subjects in multiple years, I could not tell you what political party they were affiliated with, number one, because it's none of my business, but because it never entered our space. And that used to be part of the benefit of the doubt that was given to teachers, because they expressed that nonpartisan ability to be able to treat our children equally, no matter who we were. And I think a lot of parents are fearful that that is not the case.
It's not the case anywhere. I mean, it's not the case in the judicial system anymore. What do they call it? They call it activism, right? Judicial activism or educational activism. They believe that their role is to socialize the students to be politically correct. That's not education. That's propaganda. No. And that is
and indoctrination, some would say. Yes.
And judges have been appointed to the bench because they're activists, and they are trying to bring about this Marxist woke society that they think is better, rather than administrating the law. And that's a very serious problem across the whole spectrum of our society, is this activism. The magazine, one of the magazines out in BC, it's a journalistic activism. They're not there to tell the truth objectively or independently. They're there to create the truth, right? And they are there to lead the public's opinion in the way they want it to go. That's what journalism has become. It's become activist, and when it becomes activist, it becomes discredited. It's not doing.
We'll see, and that's interesting. You should say that, because someone like Noam Chomsky would say that that's the manufacture of consent.
Yes, yeah, and he would be against that, wouldn't he?
He certainly would be, and it's an interesting thing to see someone's evolution like Mr. Chomsky over such a time, and to see such an authoritarian time arriving upon us. And he's so old now; he's approaching 90s, I'm sure. So it's I think the good public life that he's had is at an end, but I wish him all the very best. I know you might not be too comfortable with international affairs, but just because it's something that interests me a great deal, Jack, I was wondering if I could just touch on that for a little bit, because I mean, I'm just gonna say it, that Australia and New Zealand are once again, well, Australia in particular is the largest prison complex on the planet. Speaking of draconian COVID measures, and these, of course, are members of our Five Eyes intelligence family of nations, and they're also our NATO alliance partners, and they're also, most importantly for me in any case, they're members of our Commonwealth family. And you know, because Canadians are so concerned, and perhaps that's the nature of the compartmentalized way that this social issue is being imposed on citizens around the world, that we're not able to talk with each other and to network, not just among our communities, but with each other in our Commonwealth. And for our alliances to be out of touch with each other, there's a lot of people that are also speaking that this is a dangerous scenario as well. The Indians and the Chinese have been saber rattling for a little while, and to have everybody in such a state of chaos and disorder, it seems a rather dangerous and opportunistic time. And I was wondering if, not just in the party itself, but just for Jack Miner, just because you're such a world-traveled individual, that you might have some thoughts on such deteriorations.
Well, the Trudeau government has been damaging and dismantling our military for some time. Our military's in, I think, very bad shape. They have attacked our top leaders like Mark Norman, Vice Admiral Mark Norman. I think the first thing for our sovereignty is to protect Canada, and let's strengthen our armed forces. And I was told there's 300 Chinese soldiers on Salt Spring Island. I don't know if that's true, but I would end that immediately. I don't think Chinese soldiers have any business being on our soil, particularly when China is, for all intents and purposes, at war with Canada. They're doing everything they can to destroy our country. And so we have to first fix our fences. We have to protect Canada. I think regarding Australia and New Zealand, our first thing we need to do is make Canada free and allow free speech. And when we start having free national debates in Canada, we can start, I think that will help the people in New Zealand and Australia and France and Germany, not just the Commonwealth nations, all the NATO nations as well. They need to see that Canada is standing free. That will make a big difference, I think, very much.
That's something that's certainly been talked about, as our standing in the world and the confidence that we had as opposed to the confidence that we've lost. That seems to be an issue as well. Yeah,
we become a mockery on the world stage with our Ballywood Prime Minister. I think we can restore it. I think we can restore it quickly, because the reason being that Canadians are still Canadians. We haven't changed. We just got this.
Absolutely.
We just got this malfeasance in government, this treasonous government. But when that government's gone, Canadians will return to being the resourceful, intelligent, good people that we've always been, and we will rise quickly to the challenge. I have no fear that Canada will take care of itself very well. And people who attack Canada will regret it.
Well, thank you so much. That's a very good final word on that, especially Jack. And I thank you very much for the time that you took to spend with us today. I hope that everybody got a chance to know your thoughts and where you come from, your position on some things a little bit better. I hope that, you and Agnes, of course, are very tired from all the running around. And I hear that tomorrow is another a day on the road for you. That'll be a cut. I hear that tomorrow. I hear that another big day on the road tomorrow is in store for you and Agnes. And I know that I just want to remind everybody that may come to meet you over the few days that are coming and over the few weeks leading up to the election, to meet you on the campaign trail, because your enthusiasm and your charm is definitely infectious. And so I wish you all the very best out on the campaign trail, Jack, and of course in the upcoming election as well.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Michael. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you.
Oh, no worries. And then we can just stop now and just talk normal now, because I'm just going to cut from there. And like I said, it'll take me a couple hours to put everything together, but it's pretty straightforward. I have the ending in the beginning. It'll just be a YouTube link, so you can just post it wherever you want. Just copy and paste it wherever you want. I'll put it as an unlisted link, not a private link and not a public link, because that way it's only going to people that you share it with, and then of course they can share it around, right?
Sure.
All right. And like I said, I'm publishing it as Rohigg Press, but again, Jack, I don't want anything I don't need anything. I'm just happy to meet you. I'm happy to have someone to speak with about these things that's so enthusiastic. And like I said, I like to participate as well. So thank you.
I went to a bowling alley in Shediac, speaking with
Oh, yes.
you, and I think I'm older than he is, and I said, well, this is very interesting, but I'm not an elder, and I'm not a senior, right? He said, oh yeah, you're a senior. No, I'm not a senior. I'm a young man with a glorious future. So yeah, I don't see myself as a senior at all.
No, I had a friend, a military friend, pass away a couple of weeks ago, and it's strange because my father passed away at 50, and this man passed away before 50, and of course, then all of a sudden, I'm thinking to myself, my God, I really am. It's strange. It just all of a sudden hits you or catches up with you. I think I'm just getting to that age.
Well, I worked hard all my life, and that physical work, good exercise, I think it's standing me in a good stead. I'm in good shape. My heart's great. Blood pressure's low. I have no issues. So full damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, right? Let's do it. Anyways,
I'm just going to sit down and I'm just going to sit down in the smoking room here while you're chatting. But yeah, I mean, thank you very much. You guys have a day today where you can get to relax. You're not on the road today. You just get to be at home.
Yeah. Can I tell you something rather personal and private? This is not being recorded, right?
No. Actually, here, just let me put end.